Oh God, I turned them over on a dab. Hello, everyone. I'm Kelly. I'm the DM here at Dork Tales, and we are going to be doing some talking today about world building, which is one of my favorite things. I even teach on it occasionally, which is always fun, and my screen's kind of weird. Oh, it's because Jen's screen is up on mine. That's why. Sorry, I've got a lot of windows open to do this whole Zoom shebang. We also have special guests joining us today. Bunny Hearted is here, over from Bunny Hearted. We also have Char from Tabletop Titties joining us.
Hello!
Hello. And I'm going to crop your head the right way, Char, because I messed it up. And you have fantastic hair, and I want it all in frame. I think that's what my hair would look like if I ever trusted to grow up past the weird place. Which is like right here.
Yep. Yep.
All right. So today we are going to be talking about world building, what it is, how to do, and also storytelling, just general principles to help you tell better stories, run better games. A little bit of background. So like I said, I'm Kelly. My pronouns are he and his and him. Yeah, all those. I'll be throwing those on our frame in just a minute as well. I am I'm a freelance writer and a occasional professor of storytelling over at the local college, and I've been lecturing on storytelling in games for about the past many years of that, like perhaps like 12 to 14 years, and I really love it. It's great. I love world building, and you can watch our world building, our improv world building, which is a crazy thought, here on Dork Tales in the Shards of Elos and all of our homebrew games. Passing the ball over to Christine. Passing the ball over to Christine shows that I used to be a waiter.
I still had myself muted because I was finishing eating.
Sorry, I had
like
you mute.
10 minutes between panels.
That's fair.
Hello, I'm Christine.
Sorry.
I play on Dork Tales, and I just realized that you used a comma instead of a period on my twitch.tv.
I'll take that out.
I was like, that looks like it's dipping down a little too low. But I play in most of the Dork Tales games. I have managed to self-care myself out of a couple of them. To not spend literally every single night of a week streaming. So.
You're a very supportive partner.
It's important.
There's not many of them. I'm going to work on that. But yeah, I haven't really had to do much of my own world building. I help with the Dork Tales world building, so that's why I'm here.
It's true. All right, passing on to Amy. Are you eating too? Did I just... Is this just the lunch break?
No,
We can do that.
No. I somehow accidentally entered full screen, and I didn't mean to do that. Hi, I'm Amy. I use she, her, they, them. I chronically press the wrong button, and it has sometimes catastrophic effects. It's a thing, okay?
That's why you're my producer.
That's why I'm the producer, because you then look at what I've done and don't do it. Exactly. Yeah, so I enjoy world building to a certain, I haven't done a huge amount of it in any major sense, but I do like world building and coming up with ideas and being creative. And this is not as though, this is not world building like bodybuilding. It's a very different thing.
It could be.
So maybe if you flex hard enough, you'll grow a new island or something.
The island of nachos.
Gotta flex your brain, man. Flex your brain.
Your brain's a muscle.
Exactly.
Your brain's 8 pounds of bacon fat.
I will, I guess, pass this over to... Where is it?
Jen.
I don't know which way.
You pointed the right direction at one point.
Down into your Kirby.
Both ways. Oh, Kirby?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's your right or left.
Something. Hey, I'm Jen. I'm in a couple of the Dork Tales games. I also have other things that I do, so I'm not in more games, despite Kelly's insistence.
I try.
He tries. I learned to say no.
I'm still learning that.
Yeah. I'm a bit of a writer. I mean, I haven't published anything, but I do like writing. I'm a big fan of literary criticism and that sort of thing. I've helped Kelly with several other games outside of Dork Tales, and I've helped other storytellers with their games and their world building. And I really enjoy the kind of logical challenge of making a world that makes sense. So that's why I'm here.
Nice. All right, pass it over to Millie.
Hi, I'm Millie. I am a professional bunny alive on the internet, by which I mean I am a VR tuber. You can find me at twitch.tv/bunnyhearted. There were some folks in the last couple of panels who were talking about wanting to hear me read stories, and that happens almost once a stream because people make me read bedtime stories all the time. I am a longtime role-playing game aficionado, and world building is one of my favorite parts of it. I think one thing that might be, I don't know, I don't think this is unique to me, but one thing I'm especially passionate about is collaborative world building and systems and settings and mechanics that allow you to build a world together with your players. Because that is my favorite thing to do in the world. I think we can come up with so much more creative things as a group than I can as an individual. I still think there's room for individual like creativity because Kelly can come up with some freaking amazing stuff that I could not come up with all the time. You just like drop of the hat, bam. But it can be really fun to bring the creative process to the table and to do it together.
Nice. James.
Hello, I'm James. Him, sorry. Yeah, I've been a role player.
Sorry about that. I copy pasted onto you. My bad. I'll fix it, James. Crap, I misgendered James.
Kelly, I hadn't even noticed.
Oh crap, you hadn't noticed?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny.
I didn't know we had pronouns. I was just feeling bad.
Oh, and I don't have pronouns myself. What the hell?
Oh no.
Anyway, I'm James, and I do role-playing games sometimes. No, I've been doing it for like 20 years. And I have loved doing lots of world-building stuff. It's pretty much my favoriteest thing out of the entire thing, other than like actually like helping people develop characters that fit into those worlds too. But I've also worked with Kelly on doing collaborative stuff a bunch of times. And basically we've both been good sounding boards for each other at various times in history, which has been pretty good. Soundboard, that's a good, yeah. But anyway, we'll come to that later.
Do it.
But yeah, that's me.
Okay, I've correctly gendered everyone now, I'm pretty sure. If I did it wrong, please...
Did you remember to include yourself?
I did this time. I have a gender, guys.
Okay.
I have not just an amorphous,
yes, now it's
an amorphous being, which would be fine.
Can I opt out?
Yeah, you can opt out. I can just put like a question mark or something. Or an exclamation mark. Anyway, let me know what symbol to put.
Consider it.
Can I put the Prince symbol there?
Oh, yes.
She's
That's
too young. They're too young.
They're too.
Sorry, I don't
Amy is too young. Longer conversation for later. Sure. Sorry to bring you into this.
I'm Char. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the DM of Tabletop Titties. I'm also a professional voice actor. You can hear me in FIFA, Madden, Snowpiercer, bunch of other stuff. And yeah, super excited. My whole podcast with Tabletop Titties is all homebrew, the world of fear for it. So I'm very thrilled to last minute be guesting on this panel.
Yeah, I'm glad you had the extra time after the last panel because that was such a good one. All right, and finally, hi, Tasha.
Hello, my name is Natasha Teskovich. I am a fashion designer. You can reach me at natashaskovich.com/linktree. My pronouns are she, but I really don't care. He, they, whatever, anything respectful is fine for me. And I have been role-playing for many years, and I have been reading and writing stories for many years longer.
All right, sounds great. So we might as well start this off with kind of a general thing. If anybody has any questions, please post them in the chat. It would be fantastic to hear them. Before we begin, I just want to say that this convention is in support of Extra Life, which is a charity that gives money to the BC Children's Hospital or the Children's Hospital on the East Coast that Millie is affiliated with. If you would like to donate some money, this convention, these panels are free of charge. It's free advice that you'd probably pay for in other settings, hopefully. And if you have a couple bucks, throw it at Extra Life. It is a great charity. 100% of the proceeds go to children, and if you're in North America, like Canada or the US, it is a tax deduction. So, hey, tax season is going to be here pretty soon for next year. Might as well get those tax receipts. And also, if you enjoy what we do, give us a follow, give Tabletop Titties a follow, give everybody's Twitch a follow here, and you can find us in the chat right now, too. We love you very much. And let's talk about building a world. So, might as well start with the beginning. When you start doing world building, what is the first thing that you think of? That is, I just tried to figure that out for myself as I was saying that sentence and realized it's the hardest question I've ever asked in a convention.
Yeah.
Or what's your favorite part of world building is probably the easiest part. Like, what's your favorite part?
Like, what kind of genre are you working with is my first question.
Okay. All right.
Like,
so
is this fantasy? Is this sci-fi? Is this regular people, superheroes? What is it?
Yeah. Is this something you're going to have to build, everything from the maps up, or are you using modern world, but with like fantastical rules?
Adapting pop culture.
Yeah.
I have to ask: Are we gonna do one of those panel-based scratch building ones where you build it in like an hour?
I don't know if we have time. We did that once where we did that at a convention
Those are
where we
fun.
did a world building, and we kept asking the audience. We kept asking for feedback. The audience would be like this and this, and we ended up in the world where dragons powered everything, but the dragons were harvested as a source of fuel in this really macabre. It was awful.
That was a weird panel.
It was weird. We didn't get there by ourselves, and that's the important thing. It was like a 60-person
It was not our
collaborative
fault.
nightmare.
I would say if we want to do that, we have to be very patient, though, because chat is going to be hearing us far behind where we actually are.
That is definitely true. Char, you were saying something.
Was I?
I thought you were. I saw your mouth. I don't know.
I'm just nodding along happily, but for me, starting world building, I think the story I want to tell with my players is what I first go off of. When we were doing Tabletop Titties, this is our first season, and I had a few different stories that we were thinking of ripping off, if you will, and we landed with the Hunger Games. So our world is really post-apocalyptic and yet super fantastical. And I think like focusing in on the story itself is a really good jumping off point because you need something to narrow it down for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's thematic. Would be somewhere good to start, I think.
And
it's like I was just thinking when you were saying that if we want to play Animal Crossing the RPG, then we probably don't want a gritty Fallout style world.
Yeah.
But
we might want lots of rolling farmland and meadows and flowers, and that could be really pretty.
I feel
and
like
sweet.
you'd have to have a long, that would be difficult because most people would be at work during the times that the stores would have to be open in the RPG.
No,
I can't commit that much time.
You just jailbreak your Switch, okay? That's all you got to do, okay?
Jailbreak your game.
Keep changing the time zone.
Okay, so let's talk about that then. Like, what's something you really love about world building, if not your favorite bit, and or what's something you hate? Because here's one for me: I hate doing economic issues inside of games because there's always one player who's really into that, and that's fine. But they're always like, yes, I'm going to start investing in fantasy stonks, and you're like, no,
Stonks.
no, not orc coin. I'm gonna copy
Coming of the Stonk Lords.
Oh my god.
So what's something that really gives you trouble? Laws and laws are something that occasionally give me trouble as well. Coming up with different laws for different regions that aren't. Unless I'm doing like a parody, and then it's really easy. Like, no one can wear hats in this place, right? And then it's a game, and it's fun. But I don't know.
Or having to wear a pumpkin on your head.
Wait.
Oh my god, that was a season, wasn't it? Oh shit, I forgot about that.
Crime.
God.
That was like 5 episodes.
Really?
I'm so prepared for this moment.
You're always prepared for crime. Yes, we did do a. We
The amount
did.
of props are insane.
I can't believe you did this.
Actually, speaking of Millie, where's your pumpkin head?
Oh yeah, put your pumpkin head on.
It's on a different avatar. I have to switch to it.
I don't know if anyone else hearing this, but I'm hearing Millie is much louder than everyone else.
Oh.
No one else having that?
Idea.
No.
You just really want to hear Millie.
Mm-hmm.
You're just stuck with me. Sorry about that.
I feel like Millie's a bit closer than everyone else, but I wouldn't necessarily say louder. Just the voice is like
microphone
right
is
here.
attached to my face. Yeah, sorry about
that's
that.
fair. That's fair.
It's also how it sound, anyways.
I really have a hard time with demographics and making sure like the spread of, especially if I'm working in some sort of fantasy world, the spread of different races and how they interact with each other, and just the big cities. Is it a big city in an elven area that's mostly high elves, or is it a mixture of human and half elves and elves? Like that sort of stuff really gets me.
What do half elves mean in your world too is one that comes up constantly. What
does half anything mean?
Exactly. And then do you call them half something then? Because like if I wouldn't turn to one of my friends and be like, yes, this is my friend Milo, the half Greek. Right?
Right?
Like why,
Yeah.
you wouldn't do that. So in our world, for example, we've made it that like if you've got non-human blood, it can. These are recessive or dominant traits. They can come up. Like, Amy, describe your character's lineage in Shards of Nirn.
Oh, yeah. So her mom is a half-orc and her dad is a half-elf. So her grandpa on her mom's side is a human and her grandmother is an orc. And that was the whole thing. And then on her
very adventurous
dad's
man.
side, very adventurous man, very brave. And then on her father's side, it was a human grandmother and an elf grandfather. And he is probably in trouble.
He's definitely in trouble because now you're the queen of elves. Because
Whoops.
heredity is an interesting trait.
Yeah.
That's fun.
I'm a quarter orc, but I went with the orc stat, like the half orc stats, because that's what I wanted to do. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And go ahead.
I was just going to say that literally yesterday in Skillshot, we were talking, the group that was playing was talking in the Facebook chat, and Cal was, wanting to be a half orc but half elf and then a bard. And so it was like he had this whole backstory that was fantastic, and none of the rest of us put in that much effort.
That's Cal.
It is Cal.
So one of the things they've done recently, we're talking about D&D for world building because it's a nice baseline, but this applies for all world building, by the way, everybody. This applies to anything in the world of darkness. You have to start thinking about little things that change and flavor the world. So when you are looking at world building, in D&D, it's really fortunate that recent books like Tasha's Cauldron of Everything have started throwing out some of the restrictions that historically have been inside of this. If you want to play a half-orc, for example, who normally is more strong and more tough and less smart and charismatic, but you want them to be like a flower child with high charisma, you can just take the stats from what would traditionally have been an elf and use them, and it's an orc because it's a game. And if people get really upset about this on Twitter and say, well, you can't do that, it's against the rules. But guess what? The rules are all made up. All rules are made up because,
Yep. Well, and especially if you're not just picking and choosing, right? It's like, well, this is a balanced character set of stats, and this is another balanced character set of stats. What does it matter if I call them an orc or an elf or whatever?
It's one of the reasons I love 5e.
It's like
aesthetic.
I just put a different skin on it.
Yeah, it's hard to... Well, I was talking to our buddy Chris Blogg, because he really wants to play 5e, and Chris Blogg is a notorious power gamer. We love him like crazy. He's a reformed one, though, so he's kind of like a white hat hacker. He goes in and looks for exploits so that he can tell his DMs, don't let anybody do this. He's found a few with 5e, but 5e is hard to break. They made everything really pretty good so far, actually.
They had a Chris on staff.
They had a Chris on staff. They actually do have, I think the two lead designers are named Chris. So, it's been christened.
Honestly, from what he's told me of some of his past characters that he's played in, I think Pathfinder, he likes to play weird.
He does like to play weird. He's a really good guy, though.
I've had a whole list of his past ones, like his 3.5 characters that were, there were definitely some characters in there, like some really interesting ones.
But play anything you want. And if you're building a world, I think that the first thing that we need to talk about is, of course, you have to establish what themes you want in the game, but also what tone you want in the game. Because if you do want, like, the Hunger Games, that has some baggage along with it that you have to negotiate and figure out, okay, well, which book of the Hunger Games, first of all? Is this going against the organizational structure, the oppressive, like, evil empire type of thing? Or...
Yeah.
Or is it more like the, I just heard a word for it, the zone punk style, living in the ruins of a fallen society type of vibe that some of the districts have. And we did the same thing when we were doing Shards of Nirn. We were like, okay, what's this going to feel like? And we decided on Inuyasha, of all things, that it was going to start feeling like it was going to be a fetch quest of magical things were spread across the world and we have to go find them. So we're always moving and traveling. And then it's like...
Specifically a shattered gem.
Yeah, and that completely
purple, not
it changed into
pink.
something. It's absolutely totally different, patent pending. But we completely changed the way we did, and one of the reasons for that strategy is try to outthink yourself in advance. Because with this, we decided, hey, we're just looking for these random things. We want to create the world as we go. So every episode, at the end of a plot arc, which was like 1 or 2 episodes, I would present them with, oh, well, you're not sure how to get to the mainland from here. There's a fork in the road. You can go between 1 or 2, maybe 3 directions. And that's so the the undercity of Grim Hollow is this way, where the undead live as living people. And this is Ballyhut, where you hear there's a rock concert happening. And then the characters would pick which way to go. And I wouldn't design that town until I knew they were headed that way, right? And that saved me a lot of prep time until the day before a game, and then it was a nightmare. But it is how we...
Yeah.
But that's a game that was supposed to be about traveling and exploring new things and having fun, because a lot of the games were parodies. Like you all have like... You have an ally who is a dryad pop singer named Triance.
Oh, yeah, she's great. She pushed me off a cliff.
She did push you off a cliff, but it was for your own good. Anyway, but like, what other ideas do you have? Like,
one thing that I always liked doing was picking out ideas that would kick you out of the banal. A good example of this actually right now is I'm playing a game called Sunless Sea. I'm not sure, you can get it free on Epic Store right now, but it's just a great game, and the entire story is London fell into like this underground cavern. Like the entire city went down into this underground cavern, and there's this massive ocean down there. There's like a second ocean.
No, that's what I call a Brexit.
Around the ocean. That's it. And there's like
I think Bats carried it basically. I think Bats picked up London and flew it underground for some reason.
What?
It's just completely ridiculous, but it kind of defines the entire world.
It's a good setting.
You can do that, by the way. You can just have Bats pick up a town. It's your world. Do what you want.
Hey, you can explain it afterwards, right?
Oh,
I think for world building for me, I tend to think about, like the themes and that sort of thing, but I feel like the world is a tool in storytelling, right? So what are you hoping to tell through the world? What is the purpose of the world and each individual part of the world? Why are they there?
What kind of story?
Because I find that I used to just build a world because I felt like I had to build an entire world, and then I'd struggle to find ways to use half of it. Whereas instead, if I find a need that I then need to fill with something, I find like my world creation is so much more alive, because it's like, well, yeah, they gotta, this story beat needs to happen. They need to climb a giant hill for some reason. So I guess hills exist now. What's around the area? What happens when a hill's here? How does that change the world?
Don't get caught up about making the whole world before you even start playing.
Yes.
You do not need the whole thing fleshed out. If they're not going there for like 10 sessions, don't worry about it.
I mean, you can do a high level one if you need to. If they need, because some players need a map that they can put on the wall that they can say, this is
where
the
we
map
are
of the world. You don't need to know the details of that forest next to them. You just need to know that it's named the Spooky Woods of Spooky the Wolf.
Yeah, and I think honestly a really good thing is to tailor your world building both to your ability and your desire to do it, and also your players, because there's nothing worse than having a world that you're like super excited about and your players do not give a shit.
Yes, player buy-in is really important, which I think one of the ways to do this is to get them involved right from the beginning. Okay, map creation, if it fits your game, can be really important, and there's 2 examples of this that you can find on the Dork Tales YouTube. Most recently in the Reign of Emery's episode 0, where we wanted to have a continental empire that was kind of slowly spreading out, and there were like island chains around it, kind of this like Roman Empire kind of vibe. So I generated a map of the continents, and then what we did is I modified a dice-based map generator. And used it to generate terrain, cities, locations, name countries that way. And we all did it together as a group. I rolled it, and then I would point at things and be like, all right, is this a mountain or a hill? And people watching it people playing in the game and watching in the chat would be like, oh, that's a hill. And I'm like, okay, help me name it. And when you let your players name things, they feel ownership, because
they want to go there. Yeah,
they care.
Right, and we did the same thing in Werewolf. We didn't film it, unfortunately, but in Werewolf, I took a big map of Vancouver, and I grabbed a bunch of different colored dice and threw them across the board or across the map, and was like, okay, all of the Forsaken tribes are red. Okay, they're there. Okay, cool. We've got where they are. So the Forsaken are kind of right in the middle. The Pure kind of have North Van and everything, and
they encircled us.
They encircled. Yeah, it was awful. They had basically, you guys, y'all have it to like Kingsway and all the way to UBC, and then it's like the Pure. It's awful. But then what we did was the places that had we named each pack that was in the area, because werewolves, of course, roam in packs. And then I had each player roll to see what your relationship with a potentially allied pack was. And every time they did this, they also had another type of dice. I think I gave you like one of each of the 7 type of dice from D&D to roll as well, that you could upgrade that roll. But when you did that, I got to add it to a potential threat. Right? And we used that to build the entire city. I threw in all sorts of weird dice that were like, oh, a magical event happened here. And guess what? Y'all found that there was a wound in the barrier between the worlds at an old government facility at Jericho Hill. That was randomly generated by y'all. You did that. You brought that on yourself. Yeah.
Well, damn.
Yeah. So rub your nose.
We make good choices.
But
Many good choices.
But you can do that. You can bring your players in on things and let them know things that that you don't be afraid to share. It's a sharing experience.
Well, and things like either or questions can be really good too, because you could have like,
holy
you
crap.
know, you're like, well, I don't want to just open this. I don't want to just open this up to like literally anything the players think of, but like it could go this way or this way. What do you guys think?
Also, I believe somebody asked, how much do you let your PCs build versus the DM? I think taking suggestions is always open, but some people are they want to take it cracked no matter what you do. So being able to think on your feet as a DM and be like, yes, but why don't we twist it this way so it actually makes sense?
So it still ties into what I actually have planned for you later on.
Yeah. Sorry, Char. I think I cut you off a little there.
That's totally fine. I was just going to say, in regards to that question as well, for the world of Wild Well, for Tabletop Titties, I designed like the main area, the main city of Fearfort, where all the action is really taking place. But I had each character design another country of the a nation of Wildwell, which I thought was really cool because then you get a lot more input. I think that I only see things from my point of view, from my life experiences. So having more voices in the overarching world building process, I think, is really beneficial for me as a world builder.
Absolutely. Millie and then James.
I think this is another spot where for me it comes down to the purpose and the mechanics, right? So I think if I'm running something that's powered by the apocalypse, where every single thing that I'm doing as a storyteller is asking, what do you do? And I want them to be directly involved in creating the narrative and creating everything that happens. I want them to be that involved in creating the world, because I think that they need to be. And it could be so much fun to hit them with something that's their fault entirely. If they decide that there's a great, terrifying wall dividing the continent and then they're trying to escape from something, I'm like, yeah, well, there's a wall in the way. Suckers. That can be a lot of fun because they take ownership over their own horrible mistakes. But if it's a system that's a little bit more rigid, that requires more like that top-down direction, like Pathfinder is a good example for that. I want to get them involved as best I can, but I feel in those sort of systems it doesn't work as well to have that much free form back and forth because the mechanics don't work for it. The mechanics don't build on top of that kind of collective narrative focus. It's all built for you to be telling them the things. You're supposed to tell them the distance they are from the goblin. You're supposed to tell them all of that stuff because those are all the things that matter in the mechanics. Whereas in Dungeon World, I don't know how far away the goblin is. Shoot it with a bow.
It's bow distance away.
Yeah, I don't know, bow.
James.
Well, one thing that I had quite a bit of success with fairly recently, and it works for this kind of how much control do you give to the players, is we did like this expats game where it was basically a group of refugees that basically fled, and I basically told it as like a history that creates the community that they eventually built, and I gave the players choices. Not so much like they get to choose names or anything like that, but they got to choose like objectives, and then I would roll for them and have those things influence it more or less based on the order that they picked them, and then and some rolls that they did, and then shaped the town that way, and it completely affected the environment, what the place was building, and then they basically wove their players into the final the final act of that, and it came out really quite well. I quite liked how the place worked. Yeah.
So building on player encouragement into settings, I think that bringing additional minds in is a fantastic way to build your worlds and get your storyteller juices flowing. There are two ways to do this. There are two reasons for this. One, because it gets you out of your rut, as Char and Millie were saying. I used to, when I ran a LARP for like 16 people, and it was like it was a really, really in-depth, like it was basically like running a TV show. Is how we tried to do it.
Yeah.
I had usually between 3 and 4 people working beneath me as narrators. I was the storyteller, they were my narrators, and we would have these meetings before game, basically the week before game, and we would have like a 3-4 hour meeting where we'd go through and try to figure out, okay, well, what's the best thing that can happen if this happens, and try to brainstorm, okay, well, why is this happening? And we would basically do, and I'm sorry that the way it turned out, it was basically an episode of House every week where I would ask you things, and a lot of times you had fantastic ideas, and I used the hell out of them, and then got a lot of credit for them. I tried to credit back, I guarantee. But a lot of times it was about me knowing enough about the players as the storyteller that when you said something, I'm like, well, maybe not that, but this is really close to that, and that fits in with their background, and being able to bounce and go, no, but we can keep going with that, and coming up with that, and because there are things that you will gain from other people's insight that you never would have on your own. Recently with Reign of Emeries, we wanted to make it a very Final Fantasy VI inspired setting with like Magitech armor and like military having guns in a fantasy setting and have magic fueled machinery. And I got a message. I asked everybody to fill out a quick survey that was like, what else do you want to see in the setting? And one of my players, Mike, actually, sent me a message and said, I'd really like to see agricultural mecha.
Ooh.
And I was like, what?
Okay.
I never would have thought about, like, of course, I grew up in the farming area of Missouri and Kansas, and I didn't think about that for some reason. Maybe I blocked it out, but like,
Fair.
What? I mean, of course there would have been agriculture increases and like mass backhoes powered by magic and things like that, and artificial rain falling everywhere during bad irrigation seasons and it just blew my mind to have that offered by a player, and everybody had great ideas, but that one in particular was just like,
oh yeah, that whole other world.
I don't know if it was Jen or Millie.
I think it was Jen.
Okay.
Cool. Mostly I was just going to say regarding like narrating for you in LARPs and stuff. A lot of the time, because James is really, really good at throwing out ideas. So there was a lot of James throwing out an idea and you being like, no, but this.
Yeah.
90% of those meetings.
If you work with somebody and have that relationship, do check in. And James has a lot of good ideas. But he's also very good at rolling with punches like that. I felt so bad.
That's all cool. I'm comfortable with that. Like,
well, and
I
especially
always loved having a sounding board, and vice versa.
Yeah, especially Kelly with your ADHD and just your brain would like twig on something and it would be amazing, but it was always brought on by someone else. Yeah. Not quite the idea you wanted.
And I'm really sorry for subjecting you to the ones where we really needed to deep dive, so I didn't take my meds till after the meeting, because shepherding me onto the path so that we could get to those moments was really difficult. I know, because I was always like, wait, we can go out and get tacos. Like, we don't have to have this meeting. And you'd be like,
oh fuck, Kelly, now I want tacos.
No, yeah.
See how oh no, all of the ADD people are going taco crazy now.
God, do this to me like this.
I just had lunch, so I'm good. But yeah, it's like, Kelly, we've been here for 2 hours and haven't done squat.
Well, okay, Jen, but all we have to do is figure out how to get Christine's. I mean, we could just do this, and then it would all just fall.
Oh yeah.
And then we'd be done in like 10 minutes.
It would be the most aggravating thing. But
and sanity check each other. That was great. Sanity checking each other.
Millie, you were going to say some stuff.
So I think you actually just hit on something really solid that I know somewhere that I have made mistakes in fantasy world building in the past, is thinking of when it comes to tech level, and like Pathfinder is an easy example because Pathfinder introduces like, gunslingers and alchemy and all of that stuff. In games with this kind of settings, like it's really common for folks to focus on that kind of technology level only as military. So the army has tanks. And like what you just said about mecha tractors, I think that's why that's so important, because that makes the world so much more believable. If the army has tanks, people have tractors and cars and all of those things. So if you're running around on horseback, blah, 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 and then suddenly the army has tanks and airplanes, that feels awkward, and it feels a little off-putting if it's like, okay, why are they standing so far above everyone else tech level wise? There has to be a reason for it, or it feels like an accidental oversight.
That's fair. Tasha, do you have some?
I think that's so important. Things like internal consistency, especially in a world with magic. Like if you have magic where in day-to-day life people can do X, Y, and Z, and then like you're like, but also all these terrible things are happening and people are starving and blah blah blah. It's like they have fucking magic, or you know, whatever it is. Like again, like technology, especially as soon as you introduce any technological element anywhere in your world, it's like, okay, what does that mean? In order for them to have gotten to that point of technology, what else had to happen in the world, and what else would come along concurrently with that? You can't just add one piece of tech.
Exactly.
So, crucial.
And if you have magic, honestly, go watch Avatar: The Last Airbender. The magic system in that is damn near flawless.
That's such an excellent example of integrating tech and magic and showing an evolution of technology throughout time in a world that was magic based.
Like Ba Sing Se and like the earthbending stuff, like the idea of making earthbend trains was just wonderful. And like some of the thought, but then you also have the problem with D&D where it's like, oh, well, why do people die in D&D? Everyone has raised dead. Yeah, it's expensive, but I mean, honestly...
But yeah, like most people don't want to die and don't want to see their loved ones die, so why do they just let people die? Like, what are these plot holes that you're missing?
And how much is reincarnate? 500 gold? Like, you could literally
like it's stupid cheap for something that no one wants their loved ones to die.
Also, then you have things like people saying like, oh, well, you know, stupid knife ear, I hate you, elf. And it's like, why? Your grandma was just reincarnated as a 12-year-old elf.
Yeah.
Like, you start having those issues where it's like, and then you have issues about
like you didn't really think this through, hey?
Well, we had an issue because going back to like inclusivity, we have one of our friends was playing a character who had spoiler for Rime of the Frost Maiden, had been killed and reincarnated, and we got to talking and decided that they were reincarnated. They had originally been a male identifying dwarf who had been reincarnated as a human woman and found who they really were through that. And it was really nice. It actually, we talked it out and really made sure that it wasn't like dumb, basically, and that it really worked well. But then you start thinking about things like, why would anybody have certain issues with types of people when you literally can cast a spell and fix that problem? Why are there rigid norms in certain parts of society?
And also, why isn't everyone in this world someone who's been like, who remembers all these millions of past lives? Like, why would you ever stop? Like, what is the rationale for this?
Yeah, like well, and also, like, how does that affect the world? Like, if an elf lives for 1,000 years, why are they not 1,000,000 times better than everybody else?
And they can reincarnate.
Yeah, right? So you have to start...
And what does this do to the childbirth rate, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, and like the amount of sheer elves, like, raining down on top of us.
Well, and
I'm not going to have a child until my third reincarnation.
Well, and elves, are elves just like, what does this do to you if you're 1,000 years old and you say you can't reincarnate or be raised, and then suddenly it's like, do you become like a Howard Hughes style recluse because you're like, I have 980 years of knowledge. If I leave my house, I could fall down the stairs. I could catch a cold. And do you become paranoid? Like, what happens from there? What, like, you have to think of the psychology of these people and peoples.
Well, and another thing on that is, like, as we see in our society, we have what the older generations think completely different from the youngest generations. What happens when those generations are 1,000 years old?
This is true. Jen, did you have your hand up?
I did, yeah, but I did want to go back to internal consistency. So
yeah, please. We're back and forth constantly.
Yeah, but if Amy and Christine have something that's more relevant to this particular point, then they can go first.
It's related to this one. Okay. So I'm just thinking, like, if you have a species or that has an aging that lives for a long time, and like they're considered only an adult once they hit like 100 and something years, do they learn things more slowly because their brains aren't developing? Like, do you have an 120-year-old elf that has the same like knowledge
mental
level
state
as like a 20-year-old human? like, how delayed is it? Like, how do they interact with each other?
Well, then
how does that work?
You have games like Vampire, where depending on which edition you read, like, your brain stops.
Well, and then it's also like when you get into things where it's like, oh, well, they're they're like 1,000-year-old so-and-so, but they are, for their species, still not an adult. And you're like, especially when people get weird about that can get into some weird stuff, by the way. Yeah, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Like that. I don't like that.
Well, and if you're on the topic of like elf longevity, so say for whatever reason, instead of playing a young elf, like most people tend to pick around 100 years. But even then, if you're living in a fairly human majority world or a shorter lived race world, like even halflings and dwarves are shorter lived than elves, knowing the conflict that has occurred in our lifetimes, in our world, how much conflict and turnover has there been in this fantasy world? Why the hell is the elf going to care? Oh, you guys will just kill each other off next time and then they'll be in charge of that city.
But that
Why
also
should
means,
I care about this?
That also means that transracial conflicts, like an elf might hold a grudge for 1,000 years, and humans, like 3 generations later, they forgot it.
Even like for playing those, why should I care about this little piddling conflict? It's going to resolve itself in 20 years.
Yeah.
Which is nothing.
Elves
to
don't
that person
own
who's
dogs.
lived 500.
Elves don't own dogs. It's just too much turnover. We own humans instead. Jen.
Yeah. So yeah, going back to like internal consistency, I just wanted to kind of pull it away from D&D a little bit, because that internal consistency is super important, particularly in your D&D games, but also in any sort of World of Darkness or something set in the modern world, particularly when you're introducing supernatural elements to it. So like there's a Scion game I'm helping with, and we had to figure out Scion, for those who aren't familiar, you're children of gods, you get powers. It's cool, but it's set in modern world. So you got to think of like there's demigods around, or there's other heroes, and how does that affect the world? We kind of determined, there are these demigods who actually act as like a supernatural law enforcement, because sometimes there are scions that go off into, third world countries and decide to become despots because they have powers that they can just inflict on regular mortals. And that sort of thought process, you've got to figure out the whys of your world, whether it's a homebrew or a D&D or, modern setting.
Can we just in the future run an entire panel on RPG plot holes, please?
Okay, I'll put it on the list of things next to
I have
crafts
so
and lighting.
much to say.
And actually, just as a quick aside to plot holes, if you do something where you're suddenly like, oh, hey, that doesn't actually make sense, figure out how it makes sense, because then you don't have to retcon yourself.
Exactly.
Unless a wizard did it.
Because that's such a good point, too. If you're like, wait, this doesn't actually, why on earth would someone do that? It's like, well, just come up with a reason. Like, find a reason.
Yeah. Try not to retcon yourself.
Exactly. Just like, oh, well, that was a specific situation because X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, that was my exact actual. That was going to be my point. Was just like, we clearly know we can see what's wrong with these plot holes, right? But how do we start fixing?
How
them?
do we solve?
You want
that?
You want your mecha to be military only, but not agriculture. Well,
why?
They're relics that that the families have been sharing for thousands of years, and they've forgotten how to fix them. They can't make any ones to use in agriculture.
Can't really
All that's
change
left over.
them.
Yeah, things like that. Yeah,
there's always a solution.
It's usually violence. Massive violence. Anyway, sorry, violence is the question and the solution. My bad. Okay, so let's talk
that
about...
was something else.
Yeah, I don't know. What world building should we... You can retcon yourself, but have it make sense, unlike all of Doctor Who, except for some of Doctor Who. Which is all of Doctor Who, which is none of Doctor Who. I don't know. Doctor Who is...
A question.
I will say, I mean, like, I guess thinking of like plot holes and internal consistency and that sort of thing, like throughout listening to this whole conversation, I couldn't help but think, like, make sure that this matters. Because if a plot hole doesn't matter and your players didn't notice it, it's probably fine. If the setting doesn't make sense, but it's the setting your players built with you and that they're happy with, that's probably fine.
Does it serve the story?
Yeah, exactly. What is the point of internal consistency? If it's to make the story better, absolutely. If it's to drag everything down into like a hellish pit, because no TV show is internally consistent anyways, your game is probably not needing to be better than a TV show.
But if it's important to you, do it.
Yeah, that's the other one. If it's important to you and if it's important to your players, go for it. If it's not, whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's exactly it with like the rebirth thing. It's like, well, this makes no fucking sense, but players want to continue being their characters, so.
Yeah, the level 7 cleric comes in to complain to you about how his village is starving, and you're like, okay, how many pounds of food can you make around?
Everybody just eats good berry smoothies.
Good
right?
berries, yeah.
So, okay, this is one of the number one lessons I give during my world building talks when I'm teaching class. If you don't need to know how they got the plans for the Death Star, like if it is not relevant, don't write it. You can write it later if it comes up. Don't stress yourself out. What you should do when you're writing a story is start with a story. Write the elements that are directly related to the story and build out from there. Do not try to build an entire world and then write a story in it. The world is not important compared to the story.
Such a good point.
Like if you're designing a campaign setting book, you are not. Odds are. You might think you are. You are not. You are going to start, and then you're going to give up within 5 years and then start a new one. Okay? If one naturally develops and you decide to write it down, that is different. Okay? And yes, there are some of you who are
Do you have experience with this?
Yes.
This seems very specific.
No, it's a couple times where I probably started and got like a month or so in and then just gave up. But I know a lot of people who do that. They're like, I'm going to write this spanning epic. And you're like, no, you're not, dude. Write a short story and then expand it. Write a novella. Write a chapter. Start small.
Build as you go.
Something small can always get bigger, okay? But you can. It's really hard to wrestle a bear, you know.
But also, if you build a whole world, it's so sterile, and you're like trying to like put a story into it, and you're not going to have inspiration.
Well, because then your story has to adapt to the setting, not your setting has to adapt to the story, and that seems counterintuitive for people who think in a very regimented pattern, right? That the setting has to make sense, and all these things have to make sense, and I have to know what the coins are called and what people's slang terms are for this. It's like, I guess, are people going to use them? Well, no, but they might. Well, they're probably not going to then. So you might need to go for a walk and stretch your legs because you work in a cubicle all day. You might need to think about this while doing your meal prep so you don't buy food at the gas station every lunch. Like, worry about your real life and focus on writing the parts that are fun and easy and are not going to kill the fun for you, because it will. Amy, I think.
So one thing that I really, really like, and that I think people get a little bit too caught up on, is names for places and things and deities and groups and etc. People don't all use the same words to talk about stuff everywhere you go. They just don't. They do not. You can have multiple names for a single god depending on where you're from and which region you're talking to and who is there. If you have something in your notes and you realize, oh no, this does not match what I said several chapters ago, maybe it's just a different person's from a different region. You don't.
Such a good point.
Right? Sometimes you'll find an old piece of text. You don't have to understand what it says necessarily, because maybe the language has changed that much and the person's gone through 3 name changes since then because
that's just an archaic form of the name.
Or having to explain that perhaps someone that you've met, it's like, oh, actually, that's my name from 3 reincarnations ago type thing.
500 years ago.
Imagine finding a text and being like, oh, well, how do I explain to my party members that this is my diary from when I was a teenager 4 lives ago? Also, can we do that? That sounds really funny.
We totally can, but we would make it be something where you wouldn't realize till halfway through the mystery, and they'd be like, "Oh shit, this is my poetry." Oh no!
Right?
But
especially if it's Or it's like something that's been translated because it was found and someone else retranslated to a different language, and then you finally get through and you're like,
oh no, this is not in mimetic, like it's a mind flare being like, it's not in mimetic verse. Oh no, when written out, it sounds so emo.
It's like, this was not what it was supposed to be. What has happened to this?
Like,
emo mind flare.
Like, this is the sort of stuff that I absolutely adore because, linguist, whatever.
Yeah, also have fun with your settings, everybody. Like, don't be super serious all the time. Stuff is actually funny. Christine, you brought up a question earlier. Somebody take that. I want to see what your opinion is on this from a mechanical level.
Oh, the one earlier that I pulled in?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've forgotten who, but somebody in the chat asked, so their question would be more for homebrew worlds. How did you create abilities without them being overpowered?
Steal them.
So now, I haven't really done that. I've assisted Kelly with it when he was creating the individual boosts that he gave each of us in Shards of Nirn for reaching level 10.
Yep.
And there was a lot of talk. Like, I didn't get as much input on my own one, but I did help with like inputting on my opinion, at least, of what the others might value for their characters, what I saw them using more. So as long as it's kind of balanced as a lot of things, like try to think how the ability will affect, if it's a combat ability, how will it affect combat? How is it going to affect their damage output? And then look and consider it for a couple of games, like, okay, how much damage is everybody else doing? Because you don't want one person doing, say, 50 a hit or a turn, calling you out, I Rock the Camaro.
Yeah.
And somebody else do 10.
Gloomstalkers are broken as shit.
So you do have to consider that when you're giving it to people. Thematic, what does their character do a lot of? What type of power do they use a lot? So my one is Malia, who is the cleric, is an auto res to 1 ability. If anybody goes below 0, I can be like, nope, you're at 1. Or you're stable or something.
You've got heroes never die, basically.
And I have enough times, and based on everything else that I have, which is based on my wisdom modifier. Now I put all my points into my wisdom modifier, so I've got 5. Because it's at a 20. Like, I raised it as high as I could go, pretty much, right at the beginning. Because I was like, nope, clerics are wisdom. That's what I'm doing.
So I think it was Millie or James. And Jen, is your hand up, actually? Like, is it?
It's sort of. We'll get through the next 3, and I'll see if I still have something to say.
And then I think it was Char, but, like,
Yeah.
we're loose. Y'all can just, like, jump in as you see fit, just respectfully to each other.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to making like a homebrew ability specifically that I'm trying not to have something that's overpowered, this is the spot where I go against my own advice usually, which is to just do whatever is fun so long as it serves the plot. Because abilities are something that specific players have that other players don't, that can make them feel unbalanced and uneven, like they're a better character than you because of that. I try really hard to balance homebrew abilities, and I do that by sort of doing a point buy system for them. So I would take a look at a level 1 spell and score it out of 3 points and say, this spell is 3 points a spell because it does this, this, and this. You know, it heals a D8 damage. Okay, so doing a D8 of heal or damage is a point. Is it touch or range? That's a point. So how many points went into Cure Light Wounds? Okay, so someone wants Cure Less Wounds that's at range. That can be like half the heal and you get range for it. That feels balanced. But if they get a special ability where it's not based on the other things at that spell level because they're healing 2d8 of damage with their Super Cure Mega Wounds because I'm sparkly, but it costs them the same as someone who's doing Cure Light Wounds, that feels unfair. But if you can feel the mechanics out of how those things were probably balanced in the first place and try to guess, you don't have to be accurate, but guess enough to be able to justify it to your table, then that feels better, at least in my experience.
Yeah, for my approach to it, I usually just don't release all the powers at once. I let them. I like kind of because the characters wouldn't probably express them all as like a level, and suddenly everything gets powerful unless that's kind of built into your game. So what I'll do is I'll kind of add drips to everyone and kind of increase the power as they go. And then if I find one of them's unbalanced, just add a little bit more, or maybe it just takes longer to fully mature, and I add some extra complexity to it. So everyone gets there in the end, but in the moment, I just use that to kind of showcase different things. Yeah, that's kind of my approach to it.
Yeah,
Right.
I was going to talk about like items in world building and like dealing with that sort of balance, because then it's less in terms of like with the other party members, but with these big bads that you're or creatures and monsters that you're fighting. But at the end of the day, if you make your party super, super strong, just make your enemies super strong too. And if you're like worried about items being overpowering and like kind of almost ruining the sense of urgency or the stakes of your story, I find that limiting their use, and then they're like you can only use it like 4 times or whatever, and then it's gone, is a great way to allow yourself to experiment and maybe make mistakes of having something too OP, but then they only get to use it 4 times.
Well, and also kind of giving your players a treat too. Like, here's a super fucking crazy cool thing that you want, but okay, limited. Just a treat.
Yeah, and I the part that I'll add is that I don't do a lot of item creation or ability creation.
Chainsaw.
I already forgot about that. Sorry, it's been a long day. James was killed by Rainbow Dash. Anyway, going on.
Nice.
That was tragic.
Oh yeah, but sorry, ADHD. Lost my train of thought there.
Oh no.
Right. So there will be a good chance, no matter what you make and how balanced you think it is, that one of your players will be creative in a way you do not expect. There's another channel that I watch where there's actually a clip going around the internet of one of their more recent campaigns that the DMs, the player does something really unexpected and cool with this item, and the DM's like, like in a joking tone, how dare you use something I created and gave to you to fuck me over? And stuff like that will just happen.
One thing that you can do for that is you just, when you're giving something homebrew to your players, discuss it with them and say like, hey, it's in beta testing right now. Like let them know that it's a beta item until we prove that this power, ability, or item is not going to destroy the game. And you say, hey, if this actually breaks the game, we're going to ease off it. Cool?
Just
cool?
be honest. Like, hey, I'm testing this. Like, I think it's a cool idea, but like, if it's not balanced, like we have to workshop it.
Yeah, and most
But
players
there's
will be fine
also,
with that.
yeah, there's also like a limit to that. If it breaks the game, true, you don't necessarily want to keep going with that. If it's just a player being super creative in a way you didn't expect, roll with it. Right? You can adjust things later.
Like,
but
okay, I see what you're doing there, but actually this item would only X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that. But I can see where you're coming from, but I don't agree.
Well,
with
I mean,
it.
I guess that you said like literally breaks the game. It's like, okay, roll with breaks the game how much?
Yeah, that's kind of that's where you got to use your judgment, right? But I guess what I'm thinking is, if your players are being creative, don't punish them for that.
Yes, exactly.
where-
Give them something else in return.
Yeah.
True. All right. So there were some other questions in the chat about, hold on, there were a couple of them. One was cool factor of fighting gods. One was the joy of breaking up nations and creating like different ethno groups and things like that. How do you
parodies?
Someone asked a strategy question of handling player DM disagreement about a role spell item, etc. And do you discuss it off stream with on stream or off stream? So if that's a streaming direct question, I can just say that off stream we don't need to have the argument on camera or the discussion on camera. Hopefully a discussion rather than that.
For an audience.
If it's a quick thing, like I don't think the spell should work like that, or I think the spell should work like that. If you use Firebolt on oil and it doesn't catch fire because the spell says it does not say it catches fire, I can see your argument very clearly. You used fire on oil, and
Yeah, like, is it a clarifying thing that needs to happen real quick, or is it a longer discussion? Too?
Yeah.
Right, and then, of course, if it's something, I generally have a rule in my games, which is, hey, if you use a spell to do something creative, then so can the enemies. Like, if you open the gate, then anybody can walk through. You can't shut the door behind you. If using fire, like, if...
This isn't Pokemon where the enemies only know one move.
Right? Well...
Tail whip.
Well, we ended up there was a misreading of the rules on my part the other day where well, sort of, it was weird. Okay, so here's the situation, just a quick rules thing. Mike, again, it's always your sibling, Josh. Mike, I had some animated armors attacking, and Mike used heat metal. However, heat metal doesn't work because it only allows you to affect items, not creatures. And technically, because it is a combatant, it is a creature. However, it is a creature made of metal, and you can target a person's armor if they're wearing it, so that you can burn them alive. And their character has used this many times. And I was thinking, oh, well, would this warp the armor? So I decided, yeah, okay, technically it's a creature, but it works. However, this thing attacks with punches and chokes. And it literally melted an NPC's face off, like a friendly. And I was like, technically, like, yes.
Like, this is the world you have created.
You did this to yourself.
Yes.
Love that.
Yes.
So, but that, empowers a player and also makes it a much worse situation, which, as the DM, you should always be making the situation worse. Always up the drama. That's what players are here for. And if your players just want to stay home and read, why are they playing a role-playing game? They could just stay home and read in real life as themselves. Or they could wear a hat. And
not less.
Well, I never understood. Sorry, go ahead.
And when you're making a rules call, like, as the DM with the player, if the player's kind of disputing it, well, if you're really sure about it, leave it for a little bit. But if you find that, hey, that thing is now not working at all. Because, I had this playing under somebody else where I was like, well, it reads like this to me. And they're like, no, that's not how it works. It works this way. It ended up being that I had to roll a 20 to hit.
This is on a basic
with the
power,
way they
right?
interpreted the rule, I could not hit ever, sort of thing. Because they weren't allowing me to add this one stat that I was pretty sure, based on the reading, should get added. But they were adamant.
But the
flurry. It was flurry of blows or something, wasn't it?
Flurry of blows and Pathfinder.
Yeah, and it basically was.
They treated it as unarmed fighting entirely.
So it was like
not
a minus
special monk fighting,
like a -6 or a -10 to each attack, rather than the -2 it's supposed to be. And it was rough.
I think so. It was a long time ago now. I don't really remember, but what I do remember is that I basically had to roll perfectly on every
time.
hit,
So
or
you're
I
only
could not
getting
hit.
1 out of 20
I would roll
attacks
every turn, and I don't do anything. I don't do anything. It's like
spend 95% of your time doing
that. Is when you now need to
reinterpret
your rule, because if your player can't do anything because of your interpretation,
they're not having
it's now no longer fun.
Interjection. I suggest that everyone use the command James Bow Dash immediately.
Oh no.
Fun fact, James was once killed by Rainbow Dash.
That's amazing.
Last night will live in infamy. All right, so sorry. Oh, you're right. There should be a W on it. Crap, not James Bow Dash. Hold on. I'll fix it. There's now a W at the end of bow. Duh.
I think also you need to turn off the global cooldown.
Oh, yeah. Hold on.
Because you've put it on and then people can't keep using it if somebody used it right before them.
That's fair. I'm on it. Advanced settings.
I noticed a few of yours have that on, I think.
Global cooldown.
You have to turn it to 0. It doesn't allow nothing in that space, but...
This is amazing, first of all.
I love it.
There you go.
It's got rainbows in it.
Yeah.
It does. And a sparkle at the beginning. There you go. Now it has a 0 cooldown.
I feel so included.
And you're so included, James.
You
okay.
now have a command.
You have a command?
I've got a couple of commands.
So
I like this one. This is cute.
Oh wait, what time do we go till on this one? Oh god, we're almost over.
Now.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think now.
Okay.
We've
If you're
been talking.
plotting
Are
a
there any
story,
other questions we missed in the chat?
we have 3 minutes
think
to get
there's a
off the
couple.
air. So,
Yeah.
so what do we got? Let's do them real quick. One person gets to answer them in one sentence. What are they?
Yeah.
But what-
Chat's
what-
just spamming
Rainbow
games going
Dash.
down.
It's fine.
Rainbow
How,
Dash,
how do you handle a GM
I know we
disagreement?
saved some.
Well, you answered that with off stream and
Yeah,
stuff. So.
yeah. I would just do like I frequently in my game as a new DM. It's the first time I'm DMing and it's live on stream. I make mistakes all the
learning in
time,
public.
but then we have an established rule that even if you know I'm making the mistake, just let it go, and then we'll fix it in the next episode with like a little announcement of like we learned new things, friends, which I think is really fun.
Yeah, that's a good way of doing it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I do see a question in chat about world resource management.
Just
Right.
send Thanos at it.
Oh, okay.
He's great at that. How to? Oh no, Joe, we can't do how not to make an ethnic
no.
group a
Disagree.
character.
Oh,
That's
no.
a panel. Just
That's a
don't.
full panel.
Just don't. Orcs are not. Orcs are not a corollary for anything, and just try your best. Like that's all I can
Just
say. on
add
Make
lots of different stuff. Just
people.
take
Yeah.
various and diverse inspiration so that if you pick only from one place, you're in danger. So try to just be diverse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're not
Diversity.
sure,
Just all the
don't do it.
diversity.
And respect them. Respect the countries and people that you build. Right? Nobody's a purely evil empire, except
Oh
for
God,
the.
pet peeve.
Like, I love our orcs in
Any
in
race or
generic fantasy
place
setting. Like,
or
And they are a blend of many
they're
different
getting
human
very,
traditions.
very cool, and I like them a lot.
That took a lot of work because I was like, oh, they're technically an ex-slave race. This could go real bad. And then we hammered it into the right shape finally. Because elves suck. We can all agree. Elves suck?
That's kind of pretty much.
Elves suck. They're basic. And I have no problem punching up and saying that my elves are
Wait.
colonial Brits.
I have big pointy ears. Am I in trouble?
Always. All right, so that's all the time we have for. We're going to be doing the art contest finale at 6 o'clock. So tune in then and see who wins art prizes. After that, at 7 o'clock, we have the community panel where you get to see Char again, as well as Kelly's going to be there from, I guess, on behalf of Drinking and Screaming, but from all sorts of things.
That's 7 or 6:30?
That's at 7 because it's going to take a half hour to just go through and talk with everybody first. And then we've got a bunch of other streams. We've got Vancouver by Night is going to be there. Vancouver by Night's already in the chat. We've got Jodo's going to be there. Precarious, Art Hard, Night Tide's going to be there. I know I'm forgetting someone. Oh, Hayden Davio is going to be there as well, of course. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And then special bonus panel at the end of the night. We all agreed that because the community panel is only 2 hours long, you're going to learn about what it's like to be a Twitch streamer. We're mostly going to shoot the shit. It's going to be a lot of fun. And you get to learn about a bunch of other cool streams. And we're going to all the Dork Tales people are going to come back at around 9-ish and just do another Dork Tales and chill. So if you're around, come ask us anything. It'll be like an AMA and we'll just hang out and play us out. So that's going to be it. You are not.
In the
You are
chat?
Vancouver. Oh, okay. In the chat, I thought he was saying he wasn't showing up, and I'm like, I already photoshopped your ass into the frame. You're coming. Yeah, you're gonna do it. I will call on Vancouver adjacent by night to be there if I have to. Which is technically us, I guess, too, as well. But anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope some of this was useful to you, and that, hey, if you like what we did here today, go and support us on Extra Life. Give us a follow, and follow all of these lovely people here. Go follow Lady Liliana, Paradoxical Ghoul. Follow Dork Tales to see more Jen. Follow Bunny Hearted. Follow Dork Tales to see more James. Follow Tabletop Titties, and follow Praline Creative for a bunch of amazing things. We will see you very shortly with the art contest and back again at 7. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
You everyone.
All right.